This is the online lecture slideshow for Philosophy 131, Learning Module 5, Part 3 of 3, Proofs of God. See Learning Module 5, Arguments for the Existence of God. In this module, you will see how philosophers such as David Hume and William Paley attempt to prove that God exists using a posteriori arguments, based on the observable, amazing complexity of nature. We examine and evaluate whether arguments from design, called teleological arguments, provide probable evidence for the hypothesis that God exists and is the intelligent designer of the cosmos and life. You will see criticisms of design arguments and also attempts at a compromise between theism and science, and intelligent design theory and naturalism. We end this part of the module, which is part 3 of 3, with a consideration of which of two theories, intelligent design or naturalism, best explains the apparent but imperfect design we find in nature. The specific learning objectives for this slideshow are answers to these questions. What is a teleological argument? What do David Hume and William Paley think of design arguments? What are the most significant criticisms of the argument from design? What is intelligent design and why is it controversial? Do intelligent design theories explain amazing complexity and apparent design in nature better than non-theistic scientific theories? Do intelligent design arguments prove God exists? Question 1. What is a teleological argument? Teleological proofs for the existence of God are arguments for the existence of God. Telos is the Greek term for end, as in the telos of an object is its purpose or its ultimate end. The telos of a watch is to tell time. The telos of a wing is to fly. The telos of an eye is to see, etc. Teleological thinking occurs whenever one describes an object in terms of its alleged aims, goals, or purposes. I use the term telos to specify the apparent design, purpose, irreducible complexity, and order found in nature. For example, wings, eyes, brains. Teleological arguments are supposed to explain telos. This telos functions as evidence of God and God's plan. Teleological arguments attempt to prove that an intelligent designer, namely God, is the best explanation of the amazing order, complexity, and diversity we observe all around us. These are also called design arguments or arguments from design for the existence of God. Many people believe that such arguments succeed in establishing that an intelligent creator deity probably made the world. Question 2. What do David Hume and William Paley think of design arguments? Theists and non-theists disagree on what explains design. Everyone agrees that telos, the appearance of design in nature, needs explaining, but theists and non-theists disagree about which explanation is best. We look at arguments for both sides in this dispute. One side in the dispute says God did it. That is, design is evidence of God. Only God could have designed the cosmos, life, brains, etc. This view goes by various descriptions. It's called theism, supernaturalism, creationism, intelligent design. The rival view is that nature did it. That is, design is only apparent. Physical, chemical, biological processes without divine intervention could produce apparently designed things. So this is non-theism or naturalism, materialism, accidentalism. There are two kinds of design arguments. Both are a posteriori. Global design arguments explain some observable feature of the whole universe, such as the fact that general laws of nature describe its workings. The whole world universe is so complex and well organized that it must have been designed. David Hume in 1779 presents and criticizes a version of this argument given by his protagonist Cleanthes, a natural theologian. That's someone who believes that observing nature provides compelling evidence of God. There are also local design arguments. These seek to explain some observable feature of a part of the universe, such as the fact that organisms are well suited to their environments. Animals have adaptations, which are so intricate and useful for their lifestyles that only an intelligent designer could have made them so capable. This is the view William Paley had in 1809. Apparently, never having read Hume, he provides a local design argument for God's existence. So do many others. David Hume, the author of Nature Argument. Here's Hume's presentation of the argument from design via his character Cleanthes in his dialogues concerning natural religion. Look round the world, contemplate the whole in every part of it. You will find it to be nothing but one great machine, subdivided into an infinite number of lesser machines, which again admit of subdivisions to a degree beyond what human senses and faculties can trace and explain. All these various machines, and even their most minute parts, are adjusted to each other with an accuracy which ravishes into admiration all men who have ever contemplated them. The curious adapting of means to ends throughout all nature resembles exactly, though it much exceeds, the productions of human contrivance, of human designs, thought, wisdom, and intelligence. Since, therefore, the effects resemble each other, we are led to infer, by all the rules of analogy, that the causes also resemble, and that the author of nature is somewhat similar to the mind of man, though possessed of much larger faculties, proportioned to the grandeur of the work which he has executed. By this argument, a posteriori, and by this argument alone, do we prove at once the existence of a deity, and his similarity to a human mind and intelligence. So, Hume has just given a global argument from design for God's existence. Here it is in outline form. Machines are produced by intelligent designers. The universe resembles a machine, since it exhibits a designed order. Designed order requires an intelligent designer. Therefore, probably, the universe was produced by an intelligent designer also. Complex machines have designers. Thus, complex natural systems have designers. Here's William Paley's The Watch and the Watchmaker argument. In 1802, William Paley produced this argument from design. In crossing a heath, suppose I pitched my foot against a stone and were asked how the stone came to be there. I might possibly answer that for anything I knew to the contrary, it had lain there forever. Nor would it, perhaps, be very easy to show the absurdity of this answer. But suppose I had found a watch upon the ground, and it should be inquired how the watch happened to be in that place. I should hardly think of the answer which I had before given, that for anything I knew the watch might have always been there. Yet why should not this answer serve for the watch as well as for the stone? Why is it not as admissible in the second case as in the first? For this reason and for no other, namely, that when we come to inspect the watch, we perceive, what we could not discover in the stone, that its several parts are framed and put together for a purpose. For example, that they are so formed and adjusted as to produce motion, and that motion so regulated as to point out the hour of the day. That if the different parts had been differently shaped from what they are, of a different size from what they are, or placed after any other manner, or in any other order than that in which they are placed, either no motion at all would have been carried on in the machine, or none which would have answered the use that is now served by it. The inference, we think, is inevitable, that the watch must have had a maker, that there must have existed at some time and at some place or other an artificer or artificers who formed it for the purpose which we find it actually to answer, who comprehended its construction and designed its use. Upon the whole, after all the schemes and struggles of a reluctant philosophy, the necessary resort is to a deity. The marks of design are too strong to be gotten over. Design must have had a designer. That designer must have been a person. That person is God. This is from William Paley's Natural Theology, or Evidences of the Existence and Attributes of the Deity, collected from the appearances of nature. So Paley makes an analogy or a comparison. He compares a watch to the universe. A watch has a watchmaker. A universe has a universe maker. Here's Paley's local argument from design for God in outline form. Complex artifacts are evidence of an intelligent designer. For example, a human designed a watch. Complex organic things, like complex artifacts, have definite functions. Highly organized natural things, for example, organisms, possess complex traits with definite functions. For example, eyes of humans and wings of birds. Therefore, complex organic things are evidence of a supremely intelligent designer. If you accept the first argument, then you should accept the second one, right? So here are two arguments. Watches are intricate and well suited to the task of measuring time. Therefore, watches are created by an intelligent designer. That's a good argument. Compare this argument. Organisms are intricate and well suited to the tasks of survival and reproduction. Therefore, organisms were created by an intelligent designer. Hume questions this comparison. He thinks the analogy, the comparison in global and local design arguments is weak. Question 3. What are the most significant criticisms of the argument from design? David Hume thought design arguments failed because the analogy between machines and the universe is very weak. The overall design of the world is not so great. This supports a lesser God hypothesis. That is, a non-omni-God, one not all-powerful or caring or all-knowing or personal, might have made the world. Even if parts of the universe exhibit design, we can't conclude that the whole universe was designed, or that if it was, a single, all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good being is responsible. Other sorts of design or deities or processes are possible. With so much evil in the world, the evidence may not necessarily point to a wholly benevolent or loving God, and supports the worry that maybe there isn't any such being, given all of this pain and suffering. This idea is expressed in Tennyson's Idylls of the King, chapter 12, The Passing of Arthur in 1885. I found him in the shining of the stars. I marked him in the flowering of his fields. But in his ways with men I find him not. I waged his wars, and now I pass and die. Oh me, for why is all around us here as if some lesser God had made the world, but had not forced to shape it as he would, till the high God behold it from beyond, and enter it, and make it beautiful? David Hume makes the case that design arguments fail because the analogy between machines and the universe is very weak. The most complex human products are designed by more than one person, so maybe the world owes its complexity to multiple gods. Often very complex things are built by fools following plans. He gives the ship example. So maybe a designer builder was just following plans for a world. Humans typically make things which have to be discarded for training craftsmen, etc. Perhaps the world was created by an infant god or apprentice god, and ought to be disregarded as evidence of divinity or perfection, because it isn't so well done. Also, the argument only tries to prove a designer, not a creator god. A creator brings forth something from nothing, but order from disorder, complexity from simplicity only suggests a designer who organizes already existing material. A designer could rearrange material that already exists without having created it. Further, when have we seen anything like a world created? The sample size for our inference is really 0. In order for the inference to work, it would have to go like this. Every universe we have ever observed which displays order and complexity was designed by an intelligent being. This universe displays order and complexity, therefore it is likely that it was designed by an intelligent being. But this argument is not available to us since there is nothing in the reference class. There are no relevant observations. We have never seen universes being created or designed. However, the advocate of the argument from design will state that the reference class used in the inference is any object, not just worlds, especially natural ones, say organisms and their complex traits, which exhibit clear design, and that Hume unfairly shifted the reference class. Hume makes another point. We observe only a minuscule part of the cosmos, and what we do see is not so well done. At best, the reference class for the sample is not representative. We observe only a small part of the universe, so one cannot infer things about the entire universe. A hair or tooth tells very little about a human, and lesser still about origins. A leaf or seed says too little about a tree, or where or from what or whom it came from, for us to draw a reliable conclusion about any design or deity. Hume pushes the analogy with human design to the breaking point. He faults inferring a designer from our anthropocentric, biased, and unrepresentative sampling of data. There are other problems. Conceivable, other explanations explain apparent design. Extraterrestrials, mischievous demons, committees of deities, etc. explain too. Natural, but unknown forces might be at work. Animals aren't designed, but born and shaped by their circumstances. Perhaps the universe was born. Maybe it grew from a seed, like an acorn. Cosmic egg creation stories explain too. Complexity of form and function does not imply design. Perhaps, Hume observes, there are other sources of design besides intelligence. Some naturally occurring complexity is not designed. This is the biggest objection one must consider. There are alternative hypotheses to theism that are as well supported by such analogies. Evolution, both physical, chemical, and biological, might also explain what we observe. So what must we realize? Purpose, complexity, design in nature does not always imply a designer. Hume is right. Perhaps there are alternative explanations. Paley is right. Chance does not explain the amazing complexity of the physical world. So here is a revised teleological argument after Hume and Paley in outline form. The physical or natural world as a whole and in its parts, for example, the amazing complexity of wings, eyes, brains, shows a great deal of order and design, on analogy with a complicated watch. Any given watch is, with highest probability, designed by an intelligent being, rather than coming together by chance. Therefore, the physical world is, with at least high probability, designed by an intelligent being, rather than coming together by chance. Moreover, this intelligent being is proportionally as great as the design of the physical world. This is called the intelligent design argument. There are many versions. In this presentation, we focus on more sophisticated versions and in greater detail. For background, skim the Wikipedia entry on intelligent design. It is thorough and fairly accurate. Question 4. What is intelligent design, and why is it controversial? Do intelligent design theories explain amazing complexity and apparent design in nature better than non-theistic scientific theories? By now in the course, you should have watched this video, Judgment Day. If you haven't, watch this video now. Nova Intelligent Design on Trial. There's a link to it in Module 5 in SAC-CT, or you can go to this web address. The purpose of watching this video is to inform you about what intelligent design is, what evolution is, and to show you how these worldviews conflict in religious and socially significant ways. William Paley has a good point. Which is more likely, amazing complexity in nature made by chance, or amazing complexity made by God? Seriously, which is more probable, that these features arise by chance, or that they are the products of an intelligent designer? It's unlikely that wings and eyes and brains are accidents. Here is a response to this. Agreed. But natural processes, unaided by God, could make wings, eyes, or brains, and even a universe. Big Bang cosmology and Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection provide an answer. Until just before Darwin and modern cosmology in the 20th century, in ancient Greece, Rome, Persia, India, China, and through the Middle Ages, common sense told us that there were only two possible explanations of amazing complexity in nature: God or chance. After Darwin, 1859, and then Big Bang theory in 1927, three possible explanations for amazing complexity in the history of the universe are now possible: God, chance, or evolution, cosmic or biological. This is a diagram of the present consensus view of cosmic evolution. I'm going to make some simplifying moves here for the sake of argument and bias. Hume makes an important point about how apparent design in nature could be explained by one God, many gods, or even lesser gods. There really are no compelling arguments for dropping these other God hypotheses from the set of possible explanations, but people just do. So I will too. Of course, polytheism is an alternative to monotheism. We Westerners choose monotheism. That is our bias. Let us presume that there is only one God, one intelligent designer who could create the cosmos. Thus, I confine this presentation to one God hypothesis, namely the view that only one God, the omni-God of Jews, Christians, and Muslims, is the most viable God did it explanation. Again, this is due to the bias of Western thinkers. Let intelligent design theories refer to the set of theistic views asserting that God designed the world. There are many versions. One traditional view is biblical creationism, which says God made the world exactly as Genesis in the Bible describes, literally. The problem here is that this old view denies much of what science shows us. But we need not take Scripture literally, so I don't discuss this view. Let's simplify further. We're going to focus on only one ID theory. Modern, sophisticated, intelligent design theories are available. It's the idea that God made the world in Big Bang cosmology plus biological evolution, and pretty much whatever else the totality of science says probably happened, is how God did it. Let us presume that ID explains telos, apparent design in nature. I find this view to be the most plausible from among all of the theistic intelligent design theories conceivable. Call it Big Bang and intelligent design theism, or just intelligent design theory, ID. This gesture is due to my bias for considering the most intelligible ID theory. Okay, total science, TS. This is the standard model: particle physics, Big Bang, cosmology, chemical evolution, genetics, geological and biological evolution, etc. It says, numerous combinations and interactions of fundamental particles and natural forces explain complex things. Naturalism presumes total science, that is, natural processes and science is all we need to account for empirical observations. It's not perfect or complete, but total science explains without requiring that supernatural entities exist or design the world. Still more simplifying moves here. ID is a God did it theory. Realize that any ID theory presumes that God must have had some role in the amazing complexity, apparent design, telos, we observe in nature. ID theory is consistent with the observation of total science. It has one serious rival, according to me: naturalism. Naturalism is a nature did it theory. Any theory is naturalistic if it explains observations in nature, such as of apparent design, by using total science only. Naturalism rivals ID since it explains without needing to presume supernatural forces or entities or gods are involved. Isn't compromise possible? Couldn't both ID and total science be compatible? Yes, ID and science are compatible, but such a view is not a compromise or middle ground. It is another way to describe sophisticated ID theory. For instance, mainstream Jews, Christians, and Muslims accept science and believe God designed the world. That's an ID theory. The big issue is whether we need God to explain apparent design in nature. ID says we need God to explain it. Naturalism says possibly not. Perhaps total science is enough. So, ID and naturalism are not compatible. ID is true only if naturalism is false. Let me explain. Can't intelligent design and naturalism both be true? Isn't compromise possible? Yes, ID and science are compatible, but such a view is not a compromise or middle ground. It's another way to describe Big Bang theism, or ID theory. There is room for God in science, yes, but then there is room for many gods and lesser gods, or no gods at all. Recall Hume's points about other gods. Realize that the original issue is whether the apparent design in nature, telos, proves that God exists. ID says we need God to explain telos, which proves God must exist. Naturalism says not necessarily, so ID and naturalism are not compatible. One says you need God, the other says we can explain nature adequately without gods. Any compromise is really an ID theory, a kind of theism. So intelligent design and total science are compatible only when you realize that such a view means that naturalism is false. Why? Naturalism is the view that you can explain natural phenomena, such as complexity and design in the cosmos, without God. It is not the view that God does not exist. It's only the view that God is not necessary. Try selling the idea that we don't need God to explain the world to a religious person. They won't buy it. The difference between intelligent design and non-intelligent design naturalistic theories reduces to rival answers to one key question. How do we best explain apparent design, complexity, and diversity in nature, or telos? ID theories postulate an intelligent designer because no mindless process could produce telos. This is what every ID theory presumes. It assumes that a mindless process, a set of mindless processes, could not produce design. Non-ID theories do not postulate any intelligent designers because some mindless process could produce telos. Let's review. There are two rival theories. God did it, that is, natural diversity and complexity is created by God. Or nature did it, amazing diversity and complexity is produced by nature. These theories, for instance, divide over the following question: could only God make a human? God did it theories say yes. Nature did it theories say no. Theists and non-theists disagree on what explains design. Everyone agrees that telos, the appearance of design in nature, needs explaining, but theists and non-theists disagree about which explanation is best. As I see it, there are only two sides. God did it, design is evidence of God, Only God could have designed the cosmos, life, brains, etc. Total science alone does not explain telos. The other view is that nature did it. Design is only apparent. Physical, chemical, biological processes, without divine intervention, could produce apparently designed things. That is, total science explains telos without supernatural entities. Naturalism provides the best alternative to ID. Review. What alternatives are there? The assumption is that a theory is not viable unless it is consistent with logic and scientific observations. This doesn't make a theory true, just plausible. But lots of rival theories are plausible, so we seek theories that provide the best explanations of data. Intelligent design, or Big Bang theism. This is a sophisticated theism that says God, the intelligent designer, used cosmic and biological evolution to make the universe. And then there's naturalism. Natural processes design the world. Cosmic and biological evolution happen. No supernatural intelligent designer required. There are other intelligent design theories, for instance that of biblical literalists who believe that God made the world exactly as described in Genesis. Now this view I'm ruling out here because it's less viable than either Big Bang theism, intelligent design theism, or naturalism, since those views are compatible with total science. The other alternative, which I think Paley makes a real good point in ruling out, is that chance alone cannot explain what we observe. So no one really thinks that accident or chance explains the amazing complexity and design we find in nature. So I'm going to rule out other varieties of creationism, at least the literal ones, and chance. God, ID theory, evolution, naturalism are the only good explanations of apparent design. There are many possible explanations. Here we confine ourselves to those regarded as the most likely. This allows us to simplify the dispute about how best to explain apparent design. That is, we can reduce the many theories to just a few serious rivals. I said before that a revised history of the universe exists. After Darwin and the Big Bang Theory, 3 possible explanations for amazing complexity are now possible: God, chance, or evolution. Let's rule out chance. All agree that random chance is an improbable explanation of apparent design. Eyes, or amazing variations in vertebrate forelimbs, arms, paws, flippers, wings, are unlikely outcomes of chance alone. Evolution does not mean chance. It's a mistake and uncharitable to say that the only alternative to God is chance, since natural processes, for example, cosmic and biological evolution, are not purely chance processes. Here is evolution in a nutshell. First, genes mutate randomly. That is, natural variations of form and function result. Organisms get selected non-randomly. Environmental constraints affect and shape who lives, adapts, reproduces, or dies. And it's populations that evolve. Species emerge, they endure, or they go extinct. Evolution occurs whenever gene frequencies in populations vary from one generation to the next. Evolution is not need-based or purpose-driven. The outcomes of any evolutionary process will always be either advantageous or disadvantageous or neutral in effect. Watch the How Eyes Evolve video for an evolutionary explanation of apparent eye design in diverse species. What evidence is there for evolutionary theory? From paleontology, we get a succession of gradual physical changes in form appears in the fossil records of plants and animals. Radioisotope dating reveals extinct ancestral life forms. From comparative anatomy, evolutionary theory predicts that related organisms will share similarities that are derived from common ancestors. From the geographical distribution of species, the presence or absence of species appearing on various continents and islands shows common descent and implies several patterns of speciation. From genetics, comparative RNA and DNA sequence analysis reveals common descent comes from the same genotypic recipe for phenotype, or how organisms appear. And speciation data predict, observe micro and macro evolutionary changes in populations and lineages. It's important to note here that evolution is not random, but some aspects of its mechanisms are. So evolution is not a chance process. For example, random genetic mutation followed by non-random natural selection can result in a population with darker coloration. To say that selection is non-random means that whether or not a mutant variation survives into future generations depends upon environmental circumstances, say, competition for resources, predators, disease, geographic or climate changes, etc. Mutant variations traits can either enhance or decrease or have no effect on the reproductive success of their bearers, organisms. See the excellent entry on this on evolution in Wikipedia. Actual design is not the same thing as apparent design, but apparent design is telos. Teleological arguments presume that telos is evidence of a designer, but telos is only the appearance of design, which may or may not have a designer. Let X be eyes, wings, brains, any extremely complex structure. Here's an argument. If X is designed, then X has a designer, at least one. X is designed. Therefore, X has a designer. This is a valid argument because the conclusion follows necessarily from the premises. The argument works if X is a watch or a building, since we see these produced deliberately by intelligent designing agents. Here's another argument. If X appears designed, then X has a designer, at least one. X appears designed, therefore X has a designer. Now this is not a valid argument because the conclusion could be false when one of the premises is false. The fourth premise. If X appears designed, then X has a designer, at least one. This is the problem. It's too weak. Some X could appear to be designed and yet not be designed. Actual design is not the same thing as apparent design. The philosophical point, some things are not what they appear to be. Actual design definitely implies a designer, but apparent design does not. Apparent design might actually be the product of an intelligent designer, or it might be the result of some other non-intelligent forces, say natural processes. Actual design is not the same thing as apparent design. The philosophical point, some things are not what they appear to be. Actual design definitely implies a designer, but apparent design does not. Apparent design might actually be the product of an intelligent designer, or it might be the result of some other non-intelligent forces, say natural processes. We want to explain apparent design in nature since such phenomena are far too improbable to have arisen by chance alone, but we can't just jump to the conclusion that divine intervention is required. But what about amazingly complex features of the world and organisms? Surely their incredible form and functionality is evidence of actual design and thus a designer. Eyes and brains are far too sophisticated not to have been designed, people say. The complexity of eyes is undeniable, however, some features of eyes are less impressive on closer inspection. Eyes are great, but some of their weaknesses and vulnerabilities belie a less than perfect or divine origin. In fact, many scientists believe the eye, its derivative form, and its many flaws is exactly what you would expect to see if a blind, unguided, unpurposeful, natural historical process shaped it. Can nature alone, unaided by God, explain this? Here are examples of the amazing complexity I have in mind. Raptors, predatory birds like hawks and eagles, have large eyes with acute vision, 8 times sharper than human eyes. Most birds can perceive ultraviolet in addition to color, and they resolve rapid movements in distant objects 2 to 8 times better than other vertebrates. The human brain is a 3-pound mass of jelly-like fats and tissues, yet it's one of the most complex of all known living structures. Up to 1 trillion nerve cells work together and coordinate the physical actions and mental processes that set humans apart from other species. Watch this video, How Eyes Evolve. There is a link within Module 5 in SACCT to this video. The purpose of watching this video is to show why evolution and intelligent design conflict, how eyes are not so well designed as we might think, and how eyes can evolve by a natural rather than supernatural process. Eye structure and embryonic development in the hagfish and lamprey, primitive eel-like vertebrates, hints at how our camera-style eye evolved and how it functioned in its early stages. The hagfish has a degenerate eye that cannot see, but that probably serves to detect light for modulating circadian rhythms. Early in development, the lamprey eye resembles the structural, simple hagfish eye, before metamorphosing into a complex camera-style eye. The human eye, too, recalls the hagfish eye during development, passing through a stage in which the retina has just 2 layers before a third layer of cells emerges. Aspects of the embryonic development of an individual are known to reflect events that occurred during the evolution of its lineage. The vertebrate eye, far from being intelligently designed, contains numerous defects that attest to its evolutionary origin. Some of these flaws degrade image quality, including an inside-out retina that forces light to pass through cell bodies and nerve fibers before hitting the photoreceptors, blood vessels that sprawl across the retina's inner surface, casting undesirable shadows onto the retina, nerve fibers that gather together to push through a single opening in the retina to become the optic nerve, creating a blind spot. This and the previous image are from the following article, Evolution of the Eye, by Trevor Lamb in Scientific American, 14 June 2011. So let me summarize this. There are some design flaws in eyes we need to notice. The neural connection of the mammalian eye via the optic nerve to the brain occurs in front of the photoreceptor cells, the retina. This blocks and scatters light before it reaches them, blurring vision. It would be better if connections were behind the retina. Further, a network of vessels which supply the nerve cells with blood sits directly in front of the light-sensitive layer which obscures vision. Squids and octopuses don't have this problem. Worse still, the optic nerve connects to the brain through a hole in the retina, causing a blind spot, a region where thousands of impulse-carrying cells have pushed the sensory cells aside. Why not put the sensory wiring behind rather than in front of the photoreceptors? Blind spots obscure the visual field. The light-sensitive inner retinal layer is not well connected to the outer layer, the sclera of the eye. Thus, we are prone to retinal tears, causing blindness as we age or experience trauma. And most humans are nearsighted, and we all become farsighted if we live long enough. When deciding between only God could do it and nature alone could do it, don't overlook other relevant data. The human eye is amazing, but other eyes are better. Bird vision is far superior. Serious eye flaws where we would expect few or none if a super-intelligent designer made eyes count against ID but for Darwin's theory, because evolution predicts that we observe imperfections and evidence of common ancestry. An intelligent designer would produce a human eye with better or at least optimal visual acuity, but this is not what we have. If God were an engineer, we would have expected a better job. We don't expect perfection, but such flaws are more likely the result of blind, unguided, non-intelligent processes than if the process which produced them was intelligently designed. If such structures as eyes are proof of God, then what sort of God are they evidence of? Design flaws look like evidence for little or no designer involvement, rather than compelling evidence for the omni-God. What are we doing here? We're explaining design. We have to consider data for and against rival hypotheses. The hypothesis that God did it or nature did it. For any complex feature X, fill in the blanks below with observations which would support or disprove each of the rival explanations. So there's 4 statements here. Here's the first statement. If an omni-God designed complex feature X, say an eye, then we expect to observe fill in the blank. Statement 2. If an omni-God had no part in designing X, then we would expect to observe fill in the blank. Statement 3. If natural processes, for example evolution, designed X, then we would expect to observe fill in the blank. Statement 4. If natural processes, for example evolution, did not design X, then we would expect to observe fill in the blank. Let's fill in the blank. Here are some answers. For the first one, we would expect to observe superior form if God had produced eyes. For example, we'd expect at least better designed eyes with fewer serious flaws. Say, eyes not prone to retinal tears or nearsightedness. For statement 2, if God had not made eyes, we would expect to observe good but flawed eyes. We would see transitional forms, also evidence of common ancestry among creatures with eyes. For statement 3, had evolution produced eyes, we would expect to observe not so superior body plans, good but flawed eyes, evidence of common ancestry. eyes would look like they evolved in about 60 other lineages independently of each other. For statement 4, if evolution had not produced eyes, if a natural process had not produced eyes, we would expect to observe superior design and function in eyes, uniqueness of genetics and form, no vestiges of common ancestry, no transitional or intermediate forms, no or very few deleterious mutations. So let's review. Why are we talking about flaws in eyes? Recall that we want to prove that God exists. One primary source of evidence is our observations of amazing complexity in nature. The assumption is that such complexity probably could not emerge without an intelligent designer. And only the omnigod is the sort of God that could produce this amazing complexity. But recent science presents us with a set of alternative explanations, say cosmic and biological explanation, which, if true, show that an intelligent designer is not necessary to explain amazing complexity. Nobody really thinks that if evolution is true, that this proves that God does not exist. ID theorists and scientists agree, mostly, that evolution does not disprove God. Eye flaws don't disprove God, but they do displace God. If evolution explains eyes, any gods are superfluous. The problem is that now, it seems, any argument from design can't prove that God exists, because it is not the only viable explanation available. Plus, flaws in eyes count as evidence for a natural rather than a supernatural process. So ID loses its primary sources of evidence. In outline, here is the argument ID theorists need. Either God made telos, with or without evolution, or nature, via evolution without any supernaturals, made telos. But it is highly unlikely that nature alone without God made telos. Therefore, God made telos. Again, this is the argument that ID theorists need. Let's accept premise 1. Really, these are the only viable options. Either God made telos or nature made it. But premise 2 is doubtful, since natural processes without supernatural influences do produce telos. Thus, the conclusion 3, that God made telos, is not proven. So the argument above, which looked really plausible for thousands of years, now looks weak. If premise 2 is false, then the conclusion does not follow. Thus, arguments from design which assume that the argument for 3 is good lose their supporting reasons for thinking that only God can explain amazing complexity in nature. Therefore, arguments from design fail to provide proof of God. Our final question, question 5. Do intelligent design arguments prove God exists? Here's a summary of objections to teleological arguments, and these are mostly from Hume. The analogy between the physical world and a watch is too weak for any sort of inductive inference to God as the intelligent designer of the world. It's an argument by a weak analogy. A rule for a part of nature, the watch, should not be made a rule for the whole of nature, namely the physical world, as Hume argued. So yes, artificial objects may require an intelligent designer, but one should not then infer that the whole universe requires such a designer. Even if at least one intelligent designer is required, this does not support exclusively the omnigod, since other gods, lesser gods, and multiple gods remain possible. We don't get an all-loving and all-good God. This is a powerful objection. The physical world may be self-ordered, not needing any intelligent designer. The laws of nature and natural processes could produce the cosmos, unaided by any supernaturals. This is another powerful objection. There's also the objection from evolution, perhaps the most powerful objection in light of total science. It is presupposed that there are only two alternatives for complex things. Either they are intelligently designed directly, or they are created by chance combinations according to natural laws and processes. However, there is a third alternative. Namely, a complex, apparently designed thing, such as an organism, may have evolved from antecedent things due to the natural processes acting blindly on them, especially evolution by random mutations in genes and non-random environment-dependent natural selection on individual organisms. I'll say just a little more about the objection from evolution. Here are some details. According to contemporary evolutionary biology, humans are not intelligently designed directly, nor are they created by a chance combination of antecedent things. Rather, humans evolved from non-human primates, by natural selection over vast spans of time. It's true that the genes of some of these non-human primates did undergo some chance mutations, and some of these mutated primates had a reproductive advantage over their cohorts, and thus evolved into modern humans with big brains and social contracts, the now dominant species of ape. This is clearly not a pure chance process, nor is it a direct intelligent design process either. The evidence for this view over intelligent design is in the flawed but beneficial form and function predicted by an unguided, non-intelligent natural process, devoid of any super-powerful, intelligent designer deity. What about a compromise, say, an evolutionary and teleological argument? One idea is that God indirectly designed eyes and brains in humans by directly designing the process of evolution by natural selection. In other words, God designed evolution so that complex organisms would most probably evolve by natural selection. He created the original state of the universe, the Big Bang, so that it would most probably and naturalistically lead to the evolution of humans. Please note, this argument does not establish an intelligent designer, but merely saves this hypothesis as a possibility compatible with the current history of the universe and life. We still need a reason to prefer an explanation with an intelligent designer over one that lacks a designer. Total science says numerous combinations and interactions of fundamental particles and natural forces explain complex things. If total science explains adequately, why postulate God? As a proof of God, teleological thinking assumes without sufficient evidence that only God explains apparent design. Even the complexity of life itself is not that improbable if recent cosmological theories are accurate. Amazing complexity in nature isn't so unlikely after all. Under modern multiverse theory, and you owe it to yourself to look this up in Wikipedia, our universe, like a bubble, exists among countless other parallel universes, each having various physical constants and different laws of physics. If a multiverse exists, then finding ourselves in one where life is possible isn't that improbable, and so needs no special explanation. Order and complexity is bound to emerge under extremely varied circumstances in many worlds. Ours is not special and not unique. This is the end of Learning Module 5, Part 3, Slideshow.